6 thought-provoking speakers shared their stories at the second annual Peterborough Speaker Series.
He started his own restaurant, not even having enough change for the customers.
It would just tell me to stay positive and show me that people actually do care.
Whose mother was shot in that very same field we had crossed, and they had to leave her there and escape themselves.
The theme this year, inspiring success.
Like I say, we do have a very diverse group of speakers. Each of them are going to touch on their own version of success.
Topics range from business and technology to arts and culture and life-changing experiences.
I've been very fortunate to be a member of the Canadian Armed Forces for 23 years, and so obviously I've had the opportunity to have some very successful life opportunities throughout that career, and I'm hoping to be able to share them with the audience this evening.
Roughly 50% of the audience from last year returned to this year's event, including this man from Lakefield, who's hoping to gain the tools needed to achieve his own success.
And I need to do something to advance my business, and that's why I came. I have a business called PK Soft Touch. It's a medical device that injects medicine into the body painlessly by only going into the skin. So this will replace a syringe, and it's going to be made here in Peterborough. We're ready to do clinical trials, but now I need to raise money. I need to raise awareness, and that's why I want to talk to somebody who knows about Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn.
This event is continuously getting better, and it's only going to keep growing. From the first year, last year was the first year. This is the second annual Peterborough Speaker Series event, and just from last year, this year, it all grew with just word of mouth.
All proceeds from the event will support community health services in the city and county of Peterborough, including the Youth Sports Concussion Program. Michelle Nelson, Checks Newswatch, Peterborough.
Another inspiration is Peter Demos. If you've never heard of him, you should. Bear with me. His immigrant father owned a shoe repair and hat cleaning store in George Street, where he would work after school. The young boy would walk to PCVS in grade 9, where his father was hoping for good things. But that year he lost interest. He kept going to the pool hall, and his grades were going downhill. His father was disappointed. He couldn't believe his son was wasting his time. He wanted more from him than shining shoes and cleaning hats, and knew an education would help him escape. The boy wasn't afraid of work. He was just moving in the wrong direction. That failing grade woke him up. He began working at Quaker Oats in the summers, saving for a higher education. His marks improved dramatically, so much so he received a scholarship at Queen's University. After graduation, he joined the National Research Council of Canada, doing ballistics research during World War II. Later, he would become a research assistant at MIT in the US, where Peterborough's Peter Demos got his PhD, became an advisor to President Kennedy, and then a professor of physics at MIT, and developed the William Bates Linear Electron Accelerators Lab, a high-powered radiation lab that doctors and physicists from around the world use today and have since then. He's still alive today in Boston and still with MIT. That's an inspiration.
It was November 2007 when I went through a life-changing experience. I was in grade 9. This was my first diagnosed concussion. I was at a hockey tournament in Ottawa, and I had a hit from behind, resulting in a headache. My first hit was not diagnosed as a concussion, and I was not in the hospital afterwards. So I was just anxious to play the next day, thinking nothing of a concussion. Playing the following day was my next mistake. I received 2 additional hits in my second game. At the time, playing the second game was all I wanted. It was my first game back from a knee injury, and I was just concentrating on how my knee felt, paying little to no attention to my head. During the second game, I had a head-on collision and fell to the ice. I got up and attempted to get back to the bench and collided with another player. I was then taken by ambulance to the Ottawa Children's Hospital. The game was never finished. My teammates are too upset to play. This experience was terrifying for both my team and myself, not to mention my parents. I had no idea that by going back into the game, I would put myself through such a terrible experience. In my opinion, nothing about me was the same. I was a completely different person. And still to this day, I'm working very hard on getting myself back to my normal. I've experienced severe emotional, physical, mental, and academic changes. I am not playing hockey, and I never got to play any of the sports I was looking forward to playing in high school, like hockey, rugby, lacrosse, or gymnastics. I have experienced a lot of mood swings and emotional struggles, and I've had to drop out of my first year of college because doing as much as reading is too much for me.
You get credit when you make a difference in this world. And I'm not talking about big political differences. I'm not talking about big academic differences. I'm talking about the little differences that we make as Canadians to help one another move forward, to empower communities, to make communities grow, and make our country what it is. Listen, I've been to some very desperate corners of our world during my 22 years in the Canadian military. There's one common denominator. And that common denominator is that there's nobody teaching, there's nobody empowering, there's no countries growing forward, there's no governments controlling nothing. But here in Canada, we do that extremely well. I can only encourage you to continue to do it. You have to make a difference. So, as a Canadian Armed Forces medical personnel, our mission is always the same. Listen, I've been to Somalia, I've been to Rwanda, former Yugoslavia. The most recent tour is Afghanistan. Doesn't matter if it's a peacekeeping, peacemaking, or war scenario. Our mission is always the same. The first thing is to provide the ultimate health care to the coalition forces. So that's anybody on your side, from any country, any soldier. The second group of people we look after, of course, is the police force and army force of the country where we are. Of course, we look after them. The third group of people we look after is if a civilian of that country gets caught in collateral damage. For example, if I'm firing at the enemy across the road and a civilian runs across and I hit that individual with my bullet, that's called collateral damage. Then we look after them at our multinational hospital. The last group of people that we look after on any mission, and I don't even put it up in the slide there because it makes me sick to speak about it. But as a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, I have certain rules. Rules of engagement, rules of armed conflict. And so I have to play by the rules. And that is that you have to look after and save the life of an enemy. I spent way too many hours during my 8.5-month tour in Afghanistan saving the life of Talibans. I'm telling you, it's the most difficult thing I do in my career, is to look after the enemy. But you sign on the dotted line, you play by the rules, so you look after the enemy.
My final year of university, I decided to do a project, and the project that I did was basically called "What Makes a Successful Person a Success?" When we think about success, many of us think about all different kinds of things. We might think about the amount of money in our bank account, or not. We might think about our educational background. We may think about the city or the town that we were raised in, or even the part of the city or the town that we were raised in. But through a lot of research and actually interviewing real people, I actually found out that success really comes down to two things, and a collaboration of some of the others that I just mentioned. But the ingredients for success really come down to two things. The first one was this. Number one, how a person thought about themselves in any given situation or circumstance. So how you think about yourself in your career, in your job, in everything else that you might do is so important to your success. How you think is massive. And the other thing that was a really important ingredient of success, the thing that I'm just going to briefly talk about for the next 10 minutes or so, was this issue related to attitude. In particular, attitude when things didn't go so well in your life.
My two brothers, my parents, and I set out to escape the tyranny of Soviet-occupied Hungary. The brief revolution of October had been crushed. Thousands had already risked their lives to gain freedom, and in a thick fog, we stumbled through muddy minefields chased by searchlights, guard dogs, and nervous border guards. Abandoned by our so-called drunken guide, we wandered about, lost, for 6 hours in amongst minefields, among intermittent gunfire, barking dogs, and searchlights. We were finally picked up by an Austrian border guard who guided us to a makeshift shelter where 24 or so people were already occupying little corners of the rooms. There among them were 2 teenage girls whose mother was shot in that very same field we had crossed, and they had to leave her there and escape themselves. In another corner, a young couple was weeping, mourning. They had drugged their baby to keep her sleeping while they were running and escaping, and they had overdosed the child and were now in the deep mourning period, recognizing what their loss was like. The following morning, we were sent on to Red Cross camp in Eisenstadt, and then on to yet another holding camp in Italy. This ragtag bunch of people. In the Italian camp, we were interviewed every day by different representatives from different countries, and they kept rejecting us. There were many reasons. This was, after all, post-war traumatized Europe. There was high unemployment everywhere, and most countries had already met their quota. And so we were amongst those people who were being looked at as possible immigrants, but didn't quite make it.